Hi everyone, I'm attorney Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Denver, Colorado, and you're watching All Up in Your Business. In this episode of All Up in Your Business, I'm going to tell you guys about some of the important steps that you need to take after you've formed your LLC. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and be sure to check the description for links to additional information and other resources. I've got a free guide down there telling you guys about how to pay yourselves in a single member LLC, all kinds of fun stuff, so check that out too. All right, so for most of us, if we're going to be starting a new business, often one of the first steps, if not the very first step that we're going to take, is to form our LLC. But forming the LLC really is just one of the first steps. It's certainly not the only steps, and there are a lot of things that you need to do after forming the LLC to be, a legal, legit business, able to operate your business the way you want to. There are a few other things you've got to do. Specifically, I've got 7 things that you should do after you formed your LLC. The first thing, number 1, after you've formed your LLC, is to get your operating agreement prepared. Now, you can find lots of templates of operating agreements online, other online services. Of course, you can work with an attorney to have your operating agreement drafted. That's what I recommend, especially if you are having other members in your LLC. If it's not just a single member LLC, you have business partners, then it is really that much more important to have an attorney help you with preparing the operating agreement, because these online templates and kind of standard forms aren't always going to work out best for every situation. So what's the point of the operating agreement? It's the agreement amongst the members of the LLC and the LLC itself, and it describes how the LLC is managed, whether it's member or manager managed. It describes how decisions are going to be made, what kind of a vote is required, majority or unanimous, supermajority, how decisions are going to be made. It will typically describe how the members can take distributions, like in at what times or what kinds of situations distributions can be made, how taxes will be allocated. It will often describe what happens if one member becomes disabled or deceased or gets a divorce even. So it always looks a little different, but the point of this operating agreement is that it helps to manage the internal workings of the LLC. And even in a single member LLC, the operating agreement is equally as important. Even though it's just you who you're dealing with, you don't have to make decisions with anybody else. You don't have to deal with anybody else inside the LLC. But even in those situations, an operating agreement is a really good idea, because it helps go towards the personal liability protection that we're looking for out of the LLC in the first place. So if you're going to go through the trouble of forming an LLC because you want the liability protection, then you need to do the other things that help you get that liability protection, which includes having that operating agreement prepared for you as well. After the operating agreement, the next thing you want to do is get an EIN, or an employer identification number, a tax ID number for your LLC. This is done through the IRS, and in a lot of cases, you can apply for it online at irs.gov, and you get the EIN right away. Sometimes in some situations, we have to submit it via fax or call in or mail the application, but in most cases, you can do it all online, and it's free. The EIN is like the social security number for your LLC. In single member LLCs, there's no requirement that you have an EIN. Unless, if you have employees or something, then you do need it. But if you're just you're the only person working for your company, you're the only member, then the IRS in most cases doesn't require an EIN. But we still typically want to get it because a lot of banks will require it. And I'm about to talk about banks in just a sec. But typically we're going to need an EIN for banking purposes. And again, with LLCs, The point of forming one is protecting your individual liability, and with that comes separating yourself individually from your business. And so the EIN is one other way to do that. It's assigning a separate tax ID number for your business, which isn't you. And so then when you have your EIN, the next thing you need to do is open up a business bank account. This is really one of the most important things to do after you've formed your LLC, and one of the things that I see most commonly missed. A real common thing that especially single member LLCs do is they'll kind of just keep everything in one account, their personal money and their business money in one account, because it's all, it's all me. Why would I need to separate it out? It's all my money. But it's not. It's not all your money. The business's income is the business's money. And so once you've formed your LLC, one of the very next steps you should do is opening a dedicated business account, or 2 or 3 or 12 or 15. You don't have to have just one. You can have multiple business accounts, but a dedicated business account where the expenses will be paid, income will be deposited, and then you only touch that money when you're taking distributions for yourself, or, for other, paying yourself from it is the only time you personally get your hands on any of that money. The fourth thing to think about after you've formed your LLC is looking into any required licenses or permits. So this is going to very much vary depending on where you are, your state, county, your local jurisdiction, your town or city jurisdiction. That's all going to vary. So you're going to need to do a little bit of research on your own, or have someone help you with that, of course. But in a lot of situations, some kind of license or permit might be required. So in Colorado, it's not terribly uncommon for some of our towns or cities to require just kind of general business licenses. So just to operate a business within the city limits or the county or something, they might require just a normal business license, no special word, but sometimes they require a home-based business license. Some local jurisdictions have that requirement. If you're going to be operating your business out of your home, then you need a particular license or permit for that. Of course, any licenses that might be required for your profession. Hopefully you've already kind of gotten those underway before you've even formed the LLC. But if you're some profession which is governed or needs licensing, like attorneys or maybe estheticians, hairdressers, contractors, the possibilities are endless. But again, this is going to very much depend on your location or where your business is located, and the specific requirements in your situation. And again, this kind of goes into some other sorts of licenses or permits, such as seller's permits or sales tax licenses, or even payroll withholding licenses. So some states or some jurisdictions would require a seller's permit, which I think often is kind of the same as a sales tax license. So some license or permit that's going to be required if you are required to collect and report sales tax. Or if you are hiring employees, then I believe most states require some kind of a payroll withholding license, something where you are licensed to withhold payroll taxes and all of that. Another important thing to think about after we've formed our LLC is insurance coverage, and making sure we've got whatever insurance policies we might need and or want. So for most businesses, some kind of general liability insurance policy is going to be beneficial. Now, these policies will apply to, general liability. If you have, let's say, an office or a retail space or something where people are coming into your location, if someone comes into your office and slips and falls, that liability will most likely, land on your business, or your business might be involved in that somehow. And your insurance coverage is going to help to pay for, legal costs defending that lawsuit, might help to pay out any damages. If the person who was injured, was awarded some damages, your insurance coverage is going to help to cover that cost. Often it'll apply if you're driving your car for business purposes and you get in an accident. Even if you don't have a physical space, even if you don't see customers face to face, there are still a lot of opportunities for liability to arise. And insurance is going to help to insulate your business's exposure. And so insurance, again, can be just general liability, but there is also a lot of situations where you might want some kind of professional liability or errors and omissions insurance, malpractice insurance, depending on your industry or your profession. It might be called something different, but something that covers if you give bad advice or if you give someone the wrong information in your professional capacity, they can sue you for that. And so that's what that professional liability or errors and omissions insurance is going to help to cover too. So when it comes to insurance, it's always going to look a little different depending on your business and your area and what kind of work you do. And all of that. So it's good to talk with an experienced insurance broker, someone who can help you figure out the best kind of coverage that you need and the proper amounts of coverage and all of that too. Once we've got our insurance taken care of, the next thing that we need to think about is contracts. Before we even start helping anybody with our service or selling our product or anything like that, there's most likely going to be some contracts that we might want to think about. Even let's say if you're a website, if that's what your business is, you've got a blog, or if you sell products on your website, something like that. Your website should have at a bare minimum terms of service or terms of use, and a privacy policy. Those are both technically contracts because it's you and your business and their website visitors or your customers agreeing to these terms. So if you have a website, then you should have terms and conditions for your website and a privacy policy. If you are a service provider, like a consultant or a coach or a lawyer or anyone else providing a service, any kind of professional service or, business to consumer services, in-home services, you want a contract between you and your customers that describes what service you're providing and what you're expecting in return and what your customers are expecting, what happens if something goes wrong, what happens if payments aren't made in time. All of those situations you want to have covered in writing in a contract. So again, contracts are going to look different for every business, every, type of situation. So if you're trying to decide what kind of contracts you need or what would be good for you to have prepared, it's a good idea to talk to an attorney about that who can help and learn more about your business and figure out what types of contracts are going to be necessary for you. And then lastly, this is kind of an easy one, but I believe every state, if not every state, most states have some annual filing requirement for LLCs. You don't just file your articles of organization and then you're done and you never have to worry about it. Most states are going to require that you file some kind of report on an annual basis. And some states might send you reminders when that happens, but not all of them do, or sometimes those reminders go into our spam mail folder or we just miss them. So as soon as you filed your LLC, I like to set reminders on my calendar of when those annual reports are going to be due. Typically, it's going to be with, by the first anniversary of your LLC filing. That, is going to depend on the state and the requirements, but it's usually going to be about a year after you've formed your LLC. So figure out what that date's going to be and mark it on your calendar now so you don't miss those deadlines. So to summarize, the 7 things that you need to take care of or consider after you've formed your LLC: operating agreement, getting a EIN or a tax ID number, opening a business bank account, getting any required licenses or permits, getting proper insurance policies and insurance coverage, drafting any required contracts or agreements, and finally, marking on your calendar when any follow-up compliance reports, periodic reports, annual reports are going to be due, getting those on your calendar now so you don't forget. Certainly, that's not everything that everybody's going to have to do. Everyone's situation is going to look a little different. So it's always a good idea to talk to an attorney in your state when you're forming an LLC to make sure that whatever, special requirements might apply to you, you're covering those, because it's always going to look a little different. And again, like I said, forming the LLC is really just, the first step in the process. It's nowhere near the only step. That's all for this episode, folks. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. And don't forget to check the description for links to additional information and resources. I've got a online platform that lets you form an LLC in any state online instantly for very inexpensive. So if you're going that DIY route, you can check the description for that link as well. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.